بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد الصادق الوعد الأمين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين ورضي الله عن أصحابه وأزواجه وأحبابه والتابعين وعنا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. أما بعد, my dear beloved, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. So first of all, it's very nice to be amongst you all here in Chicago and at the University of Chicago too. But it's nice to be back up north for me. It's nice to be in Chicago. I have lots of memories in Chicago. I rotated when I was in med school in Chicago. And I stayed in the dorms in downtown, and I had to do the same thing you all did. And I'm glad I'm not a student anymore. That's something I can tell you. But I enjoy. My first son was born in Chicago, right here in downtown Chicago. So there's a special connection to Chicago that I have in my heart. So a shout out from down south. We love y'all. I want to thank the MSA of the University of Chicago. Allah bless them for inviting me, and I'm honored to be amongst you here today. Also, a special privilege and honor for me personally to see my friend, Brother Kareem, and I was also surprised to my other friend, Brother Amr, from Indiana, who also turns out to be from Aleppo, the same city I was born and raised in Syria. It used to be, I don't know if it exists anymore, but good old days. But it's nice to see many of you. I've seen many faces. So anyway, they want me to talk about النهي بالمعروف الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر. I'm going to say the other way around. Well, that's just the nature of the times, right? But I always like to do diagnostics before I proceed to treatment and prognosis. Because it's important first to sort of know what happened, right? You have to know what happened. So then we can sort of apply that mechanism of al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa-nahy an-munkar, because al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa-nahy an-munkar, enjoining the good. If you want to translate, I don't know, we were discussing, me and Brother Kareem, about a good translation for it, and I don't know. My English is my second or third language, so I hope I'm not screaming. Okay. So I don't, enjoining the good, forbidding the evil sounds good enough for me at a basic layman level language. But this concept, just like any other Islamic concept, major Islamic concept, I think it's echoing. Huh? My decibels are not, right. All right, there you go. That's good. Good? All right, alhamdulillah, that's good. We want to talk, right? We want to, sort of talk to each other, share with each other. All right, so any major concept, Islamically speaking, such as the al-amr bil ma'ruf, enjoining the good, forbidding the evil, the whole faith of Islam is based on a couple of things. First of all, you have to be faithful to text. And by text, I mean here the Quran and the authentic prophetic sunnah. That's text. Faithful to text and true to context. Both. Faithful to text, true to context. Oftentimes problems arise when one of these two things are not there. Either unfaithful to text or untrue to context. And that malleability of our faith is what makes it also special, extra special in a sense. So I'm going first into diagnostics. What happened, why we're here, and look, you all are grad students and intellectuals in your own field, so I don't think we need to go and talk about extracting information. I think we can, by putting diagnostics, you should be making differentials already. Right? I mean, and then we'll go from there. at the beginning of the past Gregorian century in Egypt and also in Syria and other places, I'm talking about Muslim majority communities, because while we have indigenous community, Muslim community here in America, obviously, especially the African American community who has struggled for a long time in this country through tough circumstances, and all Muslims who are in this country today stand on the shoulders of the great African Americans who have actually sacrificed and paved the way for lots of things on civic rights issues, on equality, on radical equity as human beings. All that stuff, we're all indebted in this country to the African American community, regardless of its faith, but specifically to the Muslims that came early on. And the African American community, as you all know, Muslims from the African American community came very early on. Many Muslims contend, and I think that's true largely, that many enslaved people came from West Africa, which was largely Muslims anyway. So it's going back to basics in that sense. But anyway, as far as the intellectual movement, and that's where because what happened to us? This ummah of Islam, what happened? Where are we? So I think we need to reflect academically and see, how did the academic thought of Muslims evolve? In the past Gregorian century, we've had some people in Egypt that tried to do reform, right? And in my view, again, reform means going back to being truthful to text and or faithful to text, true to context. Like Muhammad Abdo, for example, in Syria, Abdurrahman al-Kawakibi, Rahimahu Allah, talking about istibdad authoritarianism or dictatorship in many names. Authoritarianism, as you all know, al-Kawakibi, Rahimahu Allah, from Aleppo. I'm not saying him because he's from the city I was born in, but anyway. They talked about istibdad or authoritarianism or dictatorship, not just in a political sense, in a religious sense, in an economic sense, in a social sense, etc., etc., right? So you don't have just one form of dictatorship or authoritarianism. So they tried to get what's going on, what's happening here. So they figured out there's few things. Obviously, you know that at the beginning of that last Gregorian century, the Ottomans had collapsed. And I'm not talking about the Ottomans, good, bad, and ugly. There's good, bad, and ugly everywhere. But the Ottomans have collapsed, and they figured, why are we falling back from the Europeans now who are advanced? Advanced means in the world, in what they do, in sciences, in things, and why are we still behind? So those such reformists, such as Muhammad Abdo, such as al-Kawakibi, such as similar people, they want to say, well, first of all, we don't have, the reason for us falling back is we don't have military power. So it's might. After the Ottomans, there's no. Others, they say also the falling back was political, because we've sort of got stuck to the sole leader. The whole country or the whole nation is reduced to a single figure. The nation is the figure, and the figure is the nation. And while that may be the case to the prophets, because the prophets are prophets of the nation, but that sort of figure should never be, or no one can fill the shoes of the prophets ﷺ. No one can say, I represent the Prophet ﷺ. From even the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in. The Sahaba, the best of the Sahaba can always say what? We aspire to emulate the Prophet's example, but we can't tell you that we exclusively represent the Prophet in what we do. We aspire and exhaust our effort to do so. But then it seems that they've identified, and I'm adding a few things. They've identified that there's only one man, one leader, and the whole country is behind the leader. And those are most of the Muslim majority communities. I'm talking spanning from all the way from the India-Pakistan subcontinent. Obviously there was no Pakistan at that time, but still all the way to the Arab world, North Africa, etc., etc. Single leader, and everything good in that, and the leader is the country. Also, there was falling back, not only politically, also economically. Economically at that time was agriculture. Industry came in late, but taxes, overtaxation and corruption made things worse. There was also, they identified social reasons for falling back. Social reasons such as illiteracy. And I mean, I'm old enough to remember, I remember in Syria in the late 70s. I wasn't that old then, but I still remember. They were doing literacy campaigns, I remember. Everywhere you'd see literacy campaigns. And their goal was at that time to sort of bring literacy to maybe, 90% of the population. And it took them 30, 40 years to do so. They probably got there now, maybe 90% or so. I don't have any numbers. I'm just throwing it like that. But it took them a while to bring people to a literacy basic. I can read and write. And I'm talking just the 1970s. So that remained there. They saw that, those thinkers and reformists, whatever it is, they saw that literacy was a problem, and that led to social falling back. Also among these social issues was doing injustice to women in society in general. And obviously this is not restricted to an Islamic or Muslim majority community context. As you all know, I mean, doing injustice to women has been a chronic syndrome in world societies. I'm not saying Islam condones that or Christianity condones that. All I'm saying is, obviously they don't, but all I'm saying is this has been the practice of society, global society for a very, very, very long time, irrespective of their religious or ethnic affiliation. There has been lots of dhulm or injustice done to women throughout history. And then also the emergence of social strata with colonization, right? So they've made the people who own a lot and those who don't own, etc. You know the whole point. And therefore that was also a door where socialism eventually came and got into there. Another thing they found, which is interesting, and that touches on what we're talking about today, they saw amongst the reasons of our falling back was also academic or scientific. How so scientific? Well, they saw a separation. Those reformists saw a separation between what is called the dunyawi ulum and the dini ulum, or the sciences of the secular sciences and religious sciences. Not only there was a separation between both of them, but they also saw that the emphasis was on discrediting secular sciences. And by secular sciences they meant chemistry, because chemistry used to be considered almost magic or kufr in a few couple of hundred years ago. You cannot do that. There was fatwas in these things. Sure, and this is or other things, this is ulum of the kuffar, etc., etc. So they saw not only a separation between ulum of the dunya and ulum of the deen, but they saw that ilm was only restrictively applied only to dini ulum, religious sciences. Anything that's not religious, that's not called science. And in fact, it became to the point that it's not even ilm. Ilm is all you have in the fiqh, wal hadith, wal tafsir, etc., wal Quran al-Kareem, طبعا, and that's it. And that's what ilm is. طبعا العلوم is all one, we believe, and the creator is all one. There is in the ulum sharif wa ashraf, fadil wa afdal, good and bad. And that's why Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us in hadith sahih, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa'. Oh Allah, I seek refuge to you from a knowledge that's not beneficial. So Islam puts a point about knowledge. A good knowledge is knowledge that's beneficial, not just knowledge, or not just dini knowledge per se. Any knowledge that's beneficial, ilmun nafi', then that's knowledge. And that's why في صحيح Imam Muslim and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, ihras ala ma yanfa'uk. Seek that which benefits you, or benefits humanity in that sense. وَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ وَلَا تَعْجَزْ. And therefore, في Hadith Muslim also, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaks about when a person, child of Adam, dies, only three things help. وَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُو لَهُ, a pious offspring making dua for them. صَدَقَةٌ جَارِيَةٌ, and he says what? عِلْمٌ يُنْتَفَعُ بِهِ. Notice, a knowledge that's beneficial to people. Just you become innovative in a knowledge that benefits humanity and benefits people, then that should be considered amongst the ulum, based on the hadith, amongst the ulum that are nafi'ah, not just theological studies in a sense. And in that, I'm trying just to make that case because there's argument about that. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells you, Sahih Muslim also, "Man nafasa an mu'minin kurbatan min kurabi dunya." Not talking about the akhirah. Whoever alleviates a difficulty to other human beings of the difficulties of the world. Well, doesn't medicine alleviate, for example, difficulties of the world? Doesn't engineering do that? I mean, where's our cell phones and communications and all these things? Are we on the same page here? And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, whoever man naffasa an mu'minin kurbatan min kurabi dunya, naffasa Allahu anhu kurbatan min kurabi yawmil qiyamah. If you bring ease to humanity in the world, Allah will bring ease to you in the hereafter. So, again, I'm going through the chronology to figure out the diagnostics, what happened and why are we here. What happened to the ummah? How do we apply al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar? How do you understand how do we do things in this world? So from knowing the ilm, in the old days ilm meant knowledge, and they called someone who possessed knowledge alim, right? Alim. And alim really has a relationship with alam, really the same. There's only fatha or kasra. Al-alim must be maksur, والعالم مفتوح, for a reason. Al-alam is open. No, I'm not talking about now, the general theory of relativity by Einstein. Actually, the specific, because in the general, as you all know, he did not account for G. But in the specific, he did in 2015. That's when he figured, all right, hey, let me get that G business going on, because otherwise, but, metastable vacuum fluctuations. I mean,
Topic's pretty heavy.
huh?
Topic's pretty heavy.
It still has to operate in low energy magnetic fields, yeah. And when we talk about low energy, I'm still asking, because you can argue that with only gravitational force and nothing but relative nothing. And that's an Ash'ari nothing, not a Mu'tazili nothing. But we'll talk about that some other time. Because nothing is also a thing, right? Nothing is a thing, right? Imaginary numbers, you all know, right? That's what Dennis Sharma did, right? And your friend Hawking, with imaginary numbers. So you basically negative root -1, root to -1. There you go. What kind of numbers you come up with? But the problem is they still operate with low energy. I'm still asking, nothing, okay, all right. Even though it's not absolute nothing. But okay, relative nothing, and low energy. Still, where did the low energy come from? Because that low energy still causes an indentation or curvature in time and space, as you all know. We're not going to go there right now. Some other time we'll talk about that business. But still, that low energy, where did it come from? Right? That low energy that yields that they call them bubbles, right? These bubbles that come in and then they actually cause that curvature. So then you have the space and time expands. All right, or how can there be low energy? Where is that from? Anyway, so alam is open. I didn't want to go there. It is either closed, open, or we'll talk about that other thing somehow. So alam is open with the lam, fatha ala lam, open. Alam, the world. And if the person becomes a alim, means he knows the information of the world, he has to have kasra on the lam. Maksur, and kasra means what? Broken. Because knowledge brings humility, my beloved. Al-alam is open, maftuh. But al-alim is maksur. ملء السنابل, the poet says ملء السنابل تنحني بتواضع والفارغات رؤوسهن شوامخ. The husks that are full, bearing with grain, they're almost bowing down because of the weight. But the ones that are empty, go to Iowa, you'll see them like this. Not the people, the husk. People in Iowa are great people, I love them. They're your next door neighbor. Al-alim becomes someone who knows information or ma'loom of the alam. And that's when they call the alim. And that's why you see, you talk about al-Razi, you talk about so and so, you talk about people who did math and physics and chemistry with fiqh. Until now, some of the ijazas in the old days, the traditional system of learning, they would say, and I am authorizing him in ulum al-fiqh wal-hisab. Mathematics. Because that's what real science is anyway. I mean, not fiqh, mathematics is. Fiqh is memorization nowadays. So they figured that the issue was also ilm. The epistemology of ilm to the Muslims lately has been severely reduced, dwarfed in fact, to the point that the ilm or the alim is no longer alim of the alam. The alim is alim only of the dini ulum, religious sciences. But not only that. That would have been great. From the dini sciences, because within the dini sciences we have 4 asasiyat and ulum ala. Ulum al-asasiyya, fundamental sciences or basic sciences, ulum al-aqaid, al-fiqh, jurisprudence, number 1, articles of faith, ulum al-aqidah, faith, theology, then jurisprudence, ahkam, then ulum al-sunnah, ulum al-Quran al-Kareem, and ulum al-sunnah al-Sharifa. Right? These are the 4 major pillars of sciences. Then we have ulum al-ala, what we call, or what scholars, they call ulum al-ala, which means the knowledge that you need to access the 4 basic sciences, which are obviously usul al-fiqh, al-lugha al-arabiyya, the foundational or legal theory, and then linguistics, and then obviously you go into history, tarajum, etc., biographies. That makes a scholar in a traditional sense. If you know these 7 or 8 ulum, nobody knows them all. Scholars specialize in one of them, and not just in one of them, in subcategory of one of them. Because you can't possibly know all the fiqh. It's not easy to know all the fiqh schools. So what happened? Instead of knowing all the fiqh, obviously, let's say, we have in Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we have 4 madhahib, al-Hanafi, al-Shafi'i, al-Maliki, al-Hanbali, right? And in the old days, there's still until now, al-Zahiri, and you have other madhahib, etc., In the old days, there were many others, in addition to non-Sunni schools of fiqh. Correct? So someone who says, I know fiqh, most likely they don't know really fiqh. They know only one school of fiqh. So even within the ulum, the Islamic religious sciences, there are supposed to be about 7 or 8 branches. It's only one branch out of all. But not even the fiqh in the same madhab. Because let's say the Hanafi madhab, out of the madhahib many. The Hanafi madhab has many schools within the Hanafi madhab. The Indian continent fatwa, for example, may be different than the Arab Hanafis in variations. There's slightly different schools within the school. And that may be different from the Turkish and the Balkan areas. Of what they're choosing is within the Hanafi school and their contribution to the school. So we don't just now know one field, we actually know subfield, and not one subfield, we know one school within the school. And do we know everything about it? Probably not. So someone studies let's say the school of the Arab Hanafis, of the school of the Arab Hanafi scholars and their choosings and their texts and their things. That he may not know anything about the Turkish or the Balkan contribution to the Hanafi fiqh, for example, or very little. And he may know nothing almost about the subcontinent contribution to the Hanafi fiqh. And you've got 2 huge schools that you're missing in the same Hanafi school of fiqh. And do you know all the Arab contribution? Yeah, scholars to Hanafi fiqh. So we went from that. So basically what happened is the Muslims abandoned the Quran to the hadith, to narrations. Why? Well, because we don't disagree about the Quran. No Muslim disagrees about the Quran. And the Quran is vast, tolerant, accepting, merciful, encompassing, inclusive, forgiving. Then we left that, we went to the narrations, riwayat. Narrations, there's the right authentic narrations and there's not so authentic narrations, and there's the strong and the weak, there's some ugly narrations, there's something. So we left the Quran to the narrations. Then we left the narrations, ugly means inauthentic or forged. We left the narrations now that are attributed to the Prophet ﷺ to the sayings, statements of the A'imma or the Imams. So we left the text entirely. We came, now we're just what the Imams have said. Then we've left the statements of the great Imams, because the great Imams were great people indeed. We left that to the very recent ones that we've made, and we've made them icons, and we've erected them as idols in a sense, as benchmarks, as validation. And then we left those scholars nowadays to preachers and public speakers and students and ambitious people and wannabes. And I always say there's nothing more destructive to the religious literacy of the common person than public speakers, activists, students of knowledge, ambitious people, wannabes masquerading as proxy and orthodoxy. Now, I'm not saying there is no need for public speakers. Absolutely there is. I'm not saying there's no need for preachers. Wow, absolutely there is. I'm not saying there's no need for activists. There's absolutely need for that. There's need for activists. There's need for students. There's need for people who want to be. There's need for public speakers too. But that's not to be confused with scholarship. That's one thing and the other. That's why today we graduate people through what we call 4-year program, 6-year program, 8-year program. I'm not telling you I have the best solution. We don't. I'm not even close. And what we do is we touch basics of things here and there. And if you've got good public speaking skills and you've got charisma, guess what? And if you can market yourself, you're a great scholar, mashallah. Absolutely. Versus when we talk about traditional scholarship, a scholar in what, my brother? Scholar in what? In which of the 4 major sciences or the supplemental 4 sciences? Are you a scholar in ulum al-Quran or ulum al-aqaid or ulum al-fiqh or ulum al-sunnah al-sharifa? Which one are you a scholar in? Once you tell me I'm a scholar in everything, you know the answer to that. Al-Imam al-Suyuti, Rahimahu Allah, who died year 911 of Hijrah, half of the Suyuti, he claimed that he was a scholar, a master in both linguistics and hadith, or linguistics, ulum al-lugha al-Arabiya and tafsir. And the people they said, you can't possibly be both. Which one are you really a master of, a scholar of? But today, anybody who reads a couple of things is a scholar, especially if you've got public speaking skills and if you can market yourself. And furthermore, we have something here in the West where if you happen to go to my birth or the land I was born in, Syria or Egypt or Morocco or other countries, and you dress a certain way and you put certain things that you can acquire, like the one I have here, and you can carry certain things if you like that, different colors, and put something here on you, and then you can carry little canes, and that indicates scholarship. And furthermore, what is even more than that is scholarship is counted by, hey brother, he went, mashallah, 7 years to Syria. I don't know how 7 years equals scholarship. I'm listening to scholarship. Now, what did you learn, brother? What beginning level scholarship, middle level scholarship books, advanced level scholarship? And which field of scholarship did you learn on a beginning level? What text did you cover on a middle level? but he's gone 10 years to Morocco, mashallah. Okay. I love to go 10 years to Morocco myself, don't take me wrong. But time does not necessarily mean scholarship in a field. You can spend 1,000,000 years anywhere you want and still be reading basic qasidas and basic ABC texts. So I'm saying that because you're all students here, many grad students and others, and you understand that. I mean, if a beginning scholarship is a PhD with some research, brother. I mean, what do you mean you're a scholar? I'm very nice. You've got a PhD. What's your research in? What do you know? What do you know? You can't know everything, possibly. There's no such thing. And what's your research on? What's your continuing education? What's your contribution? All that stuff that I think is important that we sometimes, unfortunately, don't pay attention to. So, I think we do lots of dhulm to knowledge itself. And we do that dhulm simply because we haven't defined scholarship yet in the West, and we're going into an edutainment mode of scholarship, or entertainment more than even edutainment. And I'm not saying there's no need for others. There's absolute need for everyone. That's not to belittle everyone else. They're all great and they all do their work. Anyway, that's what happened to us here. Another reason why we came all the way here also because colonization. Most Muslim majority countries were colonized. Muslims in the US were under slavery at the beginning, etc., etc. As you all know, colonization is like slavery. It's just a different form of slavery. When you colonize people and you sort of destroy the fabric, the human fabric of the nation or of the people of the community. But surely colonization left. And we should never, Islam never tells you to blame others for what happened. I mean, the Quran always insists that you have only yourself to blame. But that's a fact. However, when colonization left, because of all the wounds colonization caused, many Muslim majority communities, especially in the past century, Gregorian century speaking, they had now hypersensitivities from everything in the West. And they viewed that anything coming from the West is a new form of colonization. It's either intellectual, it's economic, it's political, so you view it with absolute suspicion. And that's also wrong. Some of it may be true, not everything is right. Because we have to understand that while political systems in the world may be corrupt, and I'd like to see a good political system, unfortunately, East and West, up until today, political systems have not been able to promote world peace, a very basic thing. East and West have been promoting violence in different labels. Some for democracy, some for religious, some for whatever it is. And I don't know why we can't get away from basic, simple thing. Thou shalt not kill. Under any name, for any label. Why can't we solve our problems through other than violence? For example, I'm just saying. So, we all have come a long way, sure, but I think the world still today, in 2018 or 1439 Hijri, the system has not, we have not provided we have not provided yet a violence-free part of the world. It doesn't matter what you call there good violence, bad violence. I don't know if there is such a thing. But anyway, Islam obviously asks us to look at things well and choose the best. Right? I mean, if someone, even if he's a colonizer, if they have something good to offer, Islam doesn't tell you can't take it. Al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min. Hikmah is the objective of the believer. You seek it and you take it. And you learn from it. Alright. We had also problems. And again, I'm talking about how we came as evolved intellectually. We had problems because Number one, problems in understanding things, problems in our reality, problems in confusion, problems, for example, that we forbade questions. You can't ask that question. What's wrong with you? You can't ask it. And we will terrorize you, intellectually speaking. Intellectual terrorism. If you ask questions, if you ask why, versus while you should have all the right to ask all questions for the sake of knowledge. No question ought to be off the table. Period. So that was a problem. You can't ask why. What I mean by that is we've removed critical thinking from religious teaching. And critical thinking in religious teaching is extremely important. It's more important than anything. You have to question everything. All right, point is we believe in the authentic text, meaning the Quran, and only the authentic prophetic Sunnah as a standard. I need to question everything. That comes anyone who says this. That became, you can't question. You just need to take indoctrination rather than critical thinking approach. Number two, also, we became what I call istihlak fikri, which means intellectual consumers. We no longer produced ideas. Much worse than producing than the Muslim community is producing gadgets and technology and other industry, let's say, is to produce the idea that produces this. This is not as important as the idea that produced it. But Muslim majority communities no longer produced ideas, they became idea consumers. And that's much, much more dangerous than producing actual things. Because it's the idea that's dangerous, that's no longer there. And that tells you the superficiality that's reaching, that we have gotten to. As far as problems in reality, sure, because in the past century and until now, religion has been confused with lots of political moves. On all sides. I'm the worst person to ask about politics, and alhamdulillah for that. But you all know wars and injustice against other human beings can never be caused truly by religion. Religion has no business favoring you over them. Religion looks at all of us as the creation of the one God, and that we all have radical equity before Him. That's what religion looks at us for, but in a way. But envy, greed, and ambition play a major factor in trying to hijack the religious cloak so it can sort of put forth its own ideas. Meaning, when wars happen because of greed, ambition, and envy, not because of religion, but in order for us to sort of conceal these self-serving emotions, we sanitize them with a religious cloak. And this is how you mobilize the people. You can mobilize the people by religious things. You can't mobilize them through greed. Greed is personal. Religious, let me make it. This is, they really hate you because of what you believe. They hate you for who you stand, for what you stand for. They hate you because you're free. They hate you because you're Christian. They hate you because you're Muslim. On all sides I'm talking. If you believe in a creator who is powerful, omnipotent, you know He created people differently. وَكَذَلِكَ لَا يَزَلُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. So you want to overturn? How can you be a believer who wants to overturn the will of God? You can always offer, but hidayah, we maintain guidance always with Allah, not with the creation. Anyway, But what we did also with the political systems, and I don't, again, political systems saying we represent Islam, the other political systems say we represent Islam, and therefore you all know what happens. No one really represents Islam entirely on their own except one person, Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the only one who says I represent Islam. Everyone else says I'm trying to represent Islam the way he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and that's my standard. It's a very clear thing. There are no secrets. But when people and political systems and other systems say we are Islam, and when they fail, guess what failed? They say, hey, Islam is no good. So that's a problem. And that's where you see. And then we went to Islam since knowledge is already put aside, and now it became a public speaking thing and a commercial thing. And it's a garnering market thing. I don't mean that in any bad way, but evangelizing dawah, meaning I've been called to preach, my brother, and I need to do whatever I need to do to look like a preacher. And if I'm a good speaker with charisma, then I preach. I become a scholar. It's a market thing and sort of evangelical approach that many people took in the past few years, and that spread all over the place. And actually, people do confuse them with scholars or even preachers. And again, I'm not saying that these people have bad intentions or bad people. Absolutely not. That's what I'm saying. But it's seriously problematic when it's masqueraded as knowledge. Entertainment is a good thing, but again, it's injecting the masses with emotions rather than actual understanding, analyzing, and knowing our deen. So, because of all that confusion up until now, all right, we are here today. Let me, representing myself and all those in the preaching or knowledge world or speaking world or those who are considered clergy or whatever it is, in my name at least, let me say, not just to you, but to all young Muslims in the world, that I am sorry. Let me apologize to all of them. I'm sorry for all of them, not only to the Muslims, actually to non-Muslims as well. I'm sorry because we, as clergy, if there is such a thing, du'at, ulama, activists, whatever, did not provide an example to be followed. I am sorry because we failed to market a very precious faith that is based on unconditional compassion to the universe, not just to selective people. I am sorry because we did not understand the deen correctly, though we are talking the deen all the time. We talk about Allah, but we haven't been talking to Allah. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry because we have not understood the deen itself. Because if it's content, context, and application, the content is not even there. We don't even know the full content, let alone understand after the content. Because you can't just know a little bit of the content and you say, I know the deen. The whole content, if you don't know the content, then you wouldn't understand the proper context. Then how can you have application, let alone innovation? And I don't mean innovation in the bid'ah way. So we get out of from the bid'ah police. Another intellectual terrorism aspect. Absolutely, irhab fikri. So I'm sorry. I am sorry because we've changed the deen into a job. Rather than a passion and a mission. I am sorry for politicizing the deen and making the deen means to achieve political, economic, and social positions. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's all I can say. I'm sorry. I am sorry about the intra-sectarianism that reached the level of takfir. This is kafir, this is kafir, this is mubtadi', this is mushrik, this is not Muslim, they're really evil people, etc., etc. I am sorry for the even slander in the name of the deen towards other communities of faith. Intra-Islamically speaking, not just with other faith communities of faith, intra-Islamically speaking. I am sorry for not manifesting the Muhammadan refined character that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with. I am sorry on the practical performance also, and on the intellectual presentations and performance that we haven't really done much with. It's regurgitation of all chewed up information that's here and there. I'm sorry because we've presented the deen oftentimes from a group perspective rather than from a deen perspective that offers all people hope, growth, and opportunity. All right. With all that, this is the reality. Let me take you back again to the past. I'm going to come quickly to the present. Muslim majority communities now going back, they had with that sensitivities from everything that comes from the West or from knowledge or from secular sciences, they automatically themselves separated the deen from the dunya and everything else in the dunya. They actually did the separation themselves. So you'll see them in the masjid, brother, you can chant in a sheet. Qasida, a'udhu billah, kufr, bid'ah, shirk, whatever it is. But at home, not Mozart is playing. I mean, Mozart is something we can talk about it, no? Bach or so, or, Chopin and all those great musicians, which actually did a lot of good job in what they did. That tells you my opinion on music. His own phone is singing 24 hours music. He doesn't see that haram, but he sees if you chant, it's haram. Everything else, that separation between the total out of reality entirely. There's no reality. And therefore we've reduced the deen to a set of rituals, that's what we do. But the problem with also Muslim majority societies, it's now the gap has been growing between Western societies and Muslim majority societies. The gap is growing. They're here, and they're here, we're here. But Muslim majority societies could not really avoid modernization in the technical sense and on the real sense. So what did they do? What does that mean? They had to bring electricity. I mean, 100 years ago, there was no electricity. But Muslim majority communities, what? They had to bring electricity. They had to bring TV. They had to bring cars, imported planes, but kept the same bunya, al-bunyat al-wa'i, meaning the structure, the deeni understanding and structure. The teaching is the same curriculum that we've devised 300 years ago at best. We still teach it today. The 300 years ago we taught to the people who mostly were unlettered, and the people who we taught, we gave them literacy. But in that sort of understanding in the old days, we still do the same thing. And we figured, hey, why worry about not studying and being innovative and bringing something that's suitable to the context? How about, just faithful to the text and true to the context? Forget true to the context, just faithful to text, that's what matters. And therefore we have maybe faithful to text at best, but not true to context. So they brought all that stuff and they did a separation between modern technology, the separation between modern technology and the brain that produced that modern technology. Meaning what? Modern technology is one thing, but the brain that produced the scientific methodology and process that produced that, the means for which it was produced and the objectives for which it was produced, all that is missing. All we did is end product consumerism, and therefore we've imported all these gadgets now lately without really understanding the process and the methodology behind them and the means and the objectives of all, and therefore obviously we went further and further and further. Obviously, as you know, because this is more of an idea than it is anything else. Okay. The other thing that happened also that led, in my view, to this is, and I have 5 minutes, let me try to do it. In recent times, meaning the past 70, 80 years, that led to where we are today is the discovery of oil and gas in the Arab world, specifically. All right, you say, all right, we've been behind for a long time. Alhamdulillah, now we've discovered oil. Hey, a lot of money. A lot of, So you think that, and obviously today gas as well. And you think with oil and gas, hey, I can use that money now to fudge the gap from where we are to where the rest of the world as far as the other sciences, so we can also now give the world something, not just consume, contribute positively back to the world. All right, so and we can maybe use money to bring that and all this stuff. So instead of using that money that we've got from the, let's say, oil and gas and all these things, so we can fudge the gap, what we did is we actually went and we took a school in the nomadic Arabian desert, a school of understanding Islam that is only in the nomadic Arabian desert. We took that school and we've put a lot of billions of dollars to import it worldwide and globally, make it global. We took a school of the Arabian Bedouins, and I have no problem with Bedouins because I have relatives who are Bedouins as well, and they're great people. But as you all know, Islamically speaking, there's many intellectual schools throughout the Muslim world of how you see fiqh, how you see aqaid, how you see things. Slight variation, not on the basic things. We took one school from the Arabian desert and we've put so much money to globalize it and to build institutions for it. So instead of actually going and fudging the gaps on all knowledge and opening and enriching the environment with lots of knowledge, we actually took a more restrictive approach where we took a very simplistic, restrictive school of understanding Islam, and we've made it the benchmark of all Islam, and then we've terrorized any other version of understanding Islam that if you dare to disagree, you're no longer Muslim. And that's what people call Wahhabism, or they call Salafism. Now, I don't want you to think that you say, man, you're considered a Sufi anyway. And why are you talking about Salafism like that? I'm not trying to do a cheap shot with that. I studied with many Salafi scholars in Saudi Arabia and others. May Allah Ta'ala grant them the best of Jannah. And I'm talking about, and I'm not saying that Sufism, sure, to me is an honor I can't claim and an accusation I will not deny. But I'm not saying that the answer to that, the antidote to that is actually Sufism or Shiism or whatever it is. I'm just presenting it from an academic point of view here. I am saying that the desert intellectual methodology of understanding Islam should not be the only way of understanding Islam, and should not be forced as the only way. This is intellectual desertification of the mind of the people. You can no longer think like all the great schools that were in Egypt before hundreds of years ago, Syria, Iraq, Morocco, all that stuff, and only Salafism makes sense, and if you dare to disagree, you're a kafir or you're a mushrik, or you're not following the sunnah. This intellectual terrorism has to stop, and therefore this kind of self-righteous, exclusivist, intolerant and intellectually terroristic, in a sense, approach eventually led to all kinds of violence, not just intellectual, now real violence. And that's why you see all these organizations that came with violence, they all base their understanding on Salafism, straightforward. So you say, look, Salafism is dying today anyway. Don't you see this year's Mawlid passed without any wars on the Mawlid like used to be? That's true. This year that happened this way, but not because our Salafi brothers, Allah bless them, stopped with that, because there hasn't been any actual academic revisionism, a proper revision. What went wrong? Why did we call these people? It's simply because we're trying to weather, some people are trying to weather the storm and change rhetoric, but there's no real change in the actual thing. And therefore, I think there is a need for that, because an intolerant understanding of Islam that claims exclusivity and self-righteous and intolerance is not going to work, and it's only going to lead to actual terrorism. And then these people are people who believe these things, who believe that they're self-righteous just because they belong to one stream versus the other traditionally established systems. They are victims of that hate. Islam should not be teaching you hate against other Muslims, even if you disagree with them. Since when unity meant conformity? Unity should not mean conformity. Same thing with others. I'm not talking about others. I mean, people, some also radical Shia brothers, Allah bless them as well, that mix the love of Ahlul Bayt and the hate of the Sahaba. How ingrained like that, extreme both together. How can deen teach you hate? What kind of deen teach you hate? So I'm telling you from here, I mean, as a Muslim who follows the book and the Sunnah, at least I claim, and that's to the authority to me, I do love, to me La ilaha illallah is very precious. Anyone who says it has my love and respect. La ilaha illallah has my love and respect. I love the Muslim who calls himself Wahhabi. And I love the Muslim who calls themselves Wahhabi or Salafi. I love the Muslim also who call themselves Shia. I love the Muslim who call themselves Khawarij. We call them, they're Ibadis. We call them Khawarij. I also love those Muslims who call themselves Khawarij. I love the Muslims who call themselves Mu'tazila. Even though I may disagree with them on different things, so long they're within La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, I have love for them despite my disagreement, creedal sometimes and others. Let me just say this. When we look at so we can finish, when we look at where we are today, when we look at the Muslim world, because we're all affected by that, all these movements, even here in the US, are affected by what happens in Muslim majority communities. So you all know now where we are. I mean, Muslims are not looked upon in the world in a positive way. The world is looking at them in a, and again, I'm not trying to blame the media, because again, while I think the media is obviously partly responsible for the negative image that's being depicted about Muslims, but it's not a call to blame, it's a call to action. What are we going to do about that? And how we can't expect other people to know about our faith. We can't expect for-profit media to tell your version of the story. You need to be telling your story to the people. And people in America and the rest of the world are good people. Human beings are good people. The human fabric is good. We just need to reach to people. Just like you don't read about everybody else's faith, don't expect people to read about yours. So, but there are many calls today to close mosques and institutions, etc., etc. 9/11, as you know, atrocious terrorist attack onto the soil of our country, and many innocent people died. And that's obviously terrorism. There's nothing else but that. And it's unfortunate. But 9/11 did not just mark the collapse of the Twin Towers in New York, which was again a very tragic event. That one human being is one too many anyway. But actually 9/11 marked also the implosion of Muslim Ummah, actually entirely, almost, if you want to say so. Starting from Afghanistan to Iraq, Somalia, then now lately Libya, Syria, Yemen, and everything else is still on the back burner maybe. It's absolute shattering, as you all know. And there's millions of people, millions literally, who have died since that. So, and you see now, as a result of all this mayhem that's been done post that, I'm not blaming anything on anything, I'm just talking about events. Thousands of young Muslims who have lost many things, or whatever it is, they've been recruited to carry out atrocities and terrorism against people throughout the land, throughout the world, and mostly amongst Muslims. ISIL and Al-Qaeda and all that, most of their victims are Muslims, not non-Muslims. The people they burned and killed and beheaded were mostly Muslims they disagreed with. And that's the whole point. And therefore, because of that, Muslims themselves now started having doubts about their deen, fearing their deen. I'm going to be done. Give me 1 minute here. The world is not stupid, my dear beloved brothers. The world knows that many Muslim preachers, or so-called scholars, again, because we confuse the word scholars with preachers and public speakers and all that, they know they teach hate against other Muslims. And the world knows that many of Muslims are being injected with hate against other Muslims much greater than against non-Muslims. They know that. People know that. And therefore the world know that before Muslims there is a lot of work and self-reflection, especially in the religious side, that's now sort of controlled by the marketeers and the people who can market themselves mostly, and maybe with good intentions. For this reason, I think we need a revolution that brings back spirituality, a spiritual revolution, an academic revolution, a looking introspective revolution. We need to look into our hearts. We need to see what this thing is. I think we need to connect back with the Prophet ﷺ's message. We are today in the Meccan times, who gave the whole world at that time hope, unconditional compassion and knowledge. And the world at that time was very troubled, my dear beloved, similarly to the world today. The principles that Al-Quran and Sunnah teach us are not Machiavellian tactics that, all right, here it's non-violence because it's now what suits the political winds. In fact, it is a matter of faith. I think it's important to go back to that love and unconditional compassion are the central themes of our beautiful faith, which ought to lead us to the reality of the prophetic mission, which is Rahma lil Alameen, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That unity should never mean conformity. It is sunnah to look at one thing and see it in two different ways. It's sunnah to look at one thing and see it in two different ways. It's sunnah to look at one thing and see it in two different ways. That we should say no then to intellectual terrorism when it comes like that. We're going back to the book and the authentic sunnah. It is important then also in that spiritual revolution to return back to the ancient Islamic principle. That means any interpretation of the Quran or sunnah that breeds violence, hatred or disdain is illegitimate because it contradicts the very root of the faith. It's important also to practice spiritual and academic neutrality as a creation of Allah Almighty, so that we have full disclosure about others, so that our youth are giving accurate, respectful, and true information about other traditions, religions, sects, and cultures, and that we encourage a positive appreciation of Allah's ways in decreeing for the world to be culturally and religiously diverse. I think basically the whole point of how do we put in context enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, it should be within the frame of a wish for a better world. That's the only way. If you're putting different glasses, whether they're group, cult, sectarian, lack of information, whatever it is, then we're not looking at the right thing. With this, I think I went way beyond my time. Jazakumullahu khairan wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Sorry about that. So go ahead. Do you people want to ask questions? Oh, you need to read the questions? That's not fair. I'm not reading the questions, Sheikh. Ala, you're reading the questions. They told me his name. And it's the bad thing to tell me people's names, because once I remember your name, you're done. I'm calling your name all the time. So, here you go, Sheikh.
I will read them, Sheikh.
Please do. And let me drink water while you're reading.
May I read next to the microphone?
Please,
I gotta hear this. Okay. The first question is, how can one develop the habit of critical thinking? What are some practical steps?
Look, developing that, obviously you already have it in the non-Islamic theology, but Islamic theology teaches us, believe it or not, ilm taught us lots of critical thinking, but indoctrination does not teach you that. So acquire knowledge either properly, and proper teachers should always allow you, not only allow you, they need to encourage you to ask why. You must ask why. It's not an option to ask why, not to ask why. And obviously through other means. But Al-Quran al-Kareem teaches you, أَفَلَا يَنظُرُونَ أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, etc., etc., etc. No.
How can we aim to gain beneficial knowledge?
Look, number one, the intention must be right. What do you mean? Why are you learning your deen? Okay, forget why are you learning your deen. Why are you practicing your deen? Why are you doing your salah? My sisters who have their hijab, that's a sign of devotion. Allah bless you. And Allah bless everybody anyway. Why are you doing that? If it's not in your heart, Ya Allah, I'm doing it, or I am praying because I want to be close to you. I want to be close to you. I know that I am going eventually to you. I am returning to you. I know that I live in a temporary, perishable world. I need you to make that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't, then what you're doing is not deen, is not spiritual, it's ritual. And ritual, you can do them for a million years. They ain't going, you're not going anywhere with them. So, first you need to clear your objective. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Hadith Sahih Bukhari, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, right? الْعَمَل بِالنِّيَّة. That's lafz Muslim, الْعَمَل بِالنِّيَّة. Lafz Bukhari بِالنِّيَّات. Right? Deeds are based on intentions. Intentions are where? Heart. Check your heart, my beloved, before you do any act of worship. Because if you're doing any act of worship, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's even a smile. And when you smile, you ought to have it an intention that it is an act of worship. Ya Allah, I'm smiling because not just because I want to move my zygomaticus muscle and get some ATP going. Obviously, you should not be talking to Allah like that because that's disrespectful in the sense, lack of adab. But Ya Allah, I want to emulate your Prophet and I want to be close to you because I know that if I smile in the face of my fellow human being, that's an act that's pleasing to you and it brings me closer to you. If you don't bring that in your heart, you're ritualizing your deen and you're not going anywhere. I don't care what sect you belong to. I don't care what group you think you're a member of, because all these membership cards ain't helping in the akhirah. Mere association does not mean salvation. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا عَمِلُوا وَتَوَاصَوْا. Right? MashaAllah, you all know.
Do you think it's a good idea to talk about accepting the good from colonizers when many post-colonial countries are still struggling with internalized inferiority from colonization?
Look, the Stockholm Syndrome. It's not easy for the abused to forget the abuse. But I say it's from an Islamic perspective. It's imperative for the abused to forgive the abuse. Let me repeat again. It's not easy for the abused to forget the abuse. It's not easy to forget. Some people are scarred forever. But it's absolutely imperative for you to forgive the abuse. Not because the abuser is worthy, but because you ought to be worthy of forgiving, number one. And because Allah Ta'ala would like you to forgive so you can be closer to Him. Meaning what? If you keep things in your heart, you're not going anywhere. You can't go to Allah Ta'ala and you're heavy. Allah only accepts you going light speed. And light, by that I don't mean 187,000 miles per second. No, I mean light like nur. Right? Alright. And with that then, if you go with lots of grudges, hate, and all kinds of negative, you can't walk to Allah. There's no way. You're so full, you're so consumed. So how can you forgive the colonizer and the people who have done wrong to you? You should forgive. You should not. You should learn. It's nice if you can forget. You should forgive. You should learn so you stop that liability from abuse again. But there's no point of keeping the drums on the same thing. We need to look in the right direction and move. And I think that's a beneficial thing. Learning is important. Learning from the experience is important. Reliving the experience is trauma. That's trauma. If you relive this, a lot of people still live in history. If you relive the trauma, you're reliving the trauma. You're not going forth. We need to move. Time is too short, so maximize your time wisely. Forgive and learn from the trauma. Learn to be good. Let that propel you to be a better human being. Yeah, I know it's ideal, but it's if with hard trying we can do it, inshallah. Because the Prophet ﷺ, that's what he did. They killed his companions. They killed his Sahaba. Sahaba radiallahu anhu ajma'een in Mecca. You know how many? Sumayya, that was killed just because she said La ilaha illallah in Mecca. Killed. Ammar bin Yasir's mother. Right? Other Sahaba were killed. Did he go and when he came liberated Mecca, he said, okay, let me kill all of you? No. Did he kept talking about? No. اذهبوا go, you are pardoned. أنتم الطلقاء. Go, you're pardoned. لا تثريب عليكم. اليوم يغفر الله لكم. It's Allah's ways. Yes.
And unless there are any more, this seems to be the last question. What can be done to begin remedying the public disposition towards thinking critically about our deen, which seems to be mostly negative?
Congratulations. In Islam we have no clergy. I know I'm trying to look like because people think this brings authority. To me, it doesn't bring authority. It's a tradition of a school I am humbled to belong to, and that's how the issue address, but doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just a sentimental thing. You need to be the ambassadors of your faith. That means you need to ask why, and you should not accept indoctrination. Education, not indoctrination. And you should know that, alright, I have the Quran and the authentic prophetic sunnah, and I'm going to put under authentic many lines, authentic prophetic sunnah. That is, why am I saying that? Because these things, the Quran and the authentic prophetic sunnah, are merciful, encompassing, inclusive, loving, forgiving. Human traditions, even if they're scholastic, are not necessarily as forgiving. They're not as tolerant. They can't possibly be. So I'm not saying disregard the tradition. Absolutely not. Exactly the opposite. But I'm saying understand the tradition within the context of the text. And so you have the right to ask. And why not? And seek answers. And research. And you don't have to take one answer. I mean, you can, as a final thing. But also, the faith is not just an academic experience. It's a spiritual experience. You can't just go. It's not just about intellectual sort of stimulation and nourishment. You need to walk the spiritual journey to Allah. You on your own. And only you on your own can do that. No one can hand you that. You need to give some time to Allah Ta'ala at night when no one is with you. You need to love Allah with all your heart and not give Him some of your heart. You need to open your heart to the love of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You can't just say, I love him mentally. That's not how it works. It's not just a rational sort of negotiation. I must love Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam because that's Hadith Anas fil Bukhari, so I love him. You need to love him really. Open your heart to him. Know about him. And question things that you think that don't make sense. You have the right to question. You have the obligation to question. And there is no question off the table. But again, I'm talking within the frame of the book and the authentic prophetic sunnah. So, that's what it is. Any other question, comment, concern, criticism? Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. Shukran to you. Thank you so much.